Good afternoon, and what an absolutely stunning opening. I cover a lot of conferences, I do a lot of conferences, and I really haven't seen anything quite as dramatic for a very, very long time. Those images are from Loch Braddon in the Galloway Forest Park, so not far from Wigtown, and part of the Dark Sky Park in Galloway, in Dumfries and Galloway. The photographs were taken by Alistair MacLeod. I believe he's a sports commentator, a sports photographer. Not the only sports photographer I know of who has a sideline in astrophotography, but those pictures are stunning, and they set up our discussion this afternoon really quite perfectly, I have to say. Before we begin, though, I'd like to just make a quick reference to our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. The Batchworth Trust, they're mentioned over here, the Batchworth Trust, Kilgalleoch Community Fund, and others. Also, just to remind you that there are links to the festival bookshop on the festival website, and there is also, if you are so moved to do so, there is also a donate button, and we really appreciate all of the support that has been given by these sponsors, and we appreciate any support you can give to the authors involved in the Wigtown Book Festival more widely. My name is Leo Enright. I'm a space commentator. My job is to travel around the world reporting on rocket launches and spaceship landings. I travel the world, but to be honest, today I would much rather be in Wigtown, as I'm sure many of you would. Sadly, I am stuck here in Marseille in the south of France. I came here for a job covering a Mars landing event here in Marseille 12 months ago, and haven't been able to leave since because of the lockdown. I want to introduce you now to our panel today. As I said, the whole discussion is really very relevant to our dramatic opening sequence. Lee Randall, the author who chaired one of the sessions earlier this week, asked people, I thought it was very pertinent. She asked people, when was the last time you checked your telephone? Was it 10 minutes ago? Was it 5 minutes ago? Was it 10 seconds ago? Were you, in fact, are you looking at it now? Are you double tasking while I'm talking? And then she asked, when was the last time you looked up, really looked up at the night sky? It's a really stunning thought that we seem to have lost our connection with the sky above us. But we're joined today by three people who very much have not lost that connection, and hopefully will encourage you to rediscover the magnificence of the night sky. Of course, Wigtown and the surrounding Dumfries and Galloway area is blessed with the most magnificent dark skies, but no matter where you are, there are opportunities to see the night sky and to be in awe of the heavens. So let me introduce you to our panel. We have Abigail Beall. She's the author of The Art of Urban Astronomy, which is a guide to stargazing wherever you are. So that does include even cities, and she'll talk to us about how you can do that. We're very pleased to have with us Professor Andy Lawrence. He's the Regius Professor of Astronomy at the University of Edinburgh. He's the author of shall I say, a chilling book? It's certainly very startling to read. It's called Losing the Sky, and it is a very blunt analysis of the threats that currently exist against that beautiful dark sky above Dumfries and Galloway. And he'll be explaining why he is so profoundly alarmed. I think he's been described by somebody as the Rachel Carson's of the night sky. Rachel Carson, of course, was the woman who wrote Silent Spring about the DDT poisoning back in the 20th century. And then last but by no means, and very much not least, we're joined by Helena Cochrane of this parish, as we say in Ireland. Helena is from Wigtown, and she is a most extraordinary young woman. I first met Helena a couple of years ago at Wigtown. I was chatting in the hall to the great, late, and so much lamented John Campbell Brown, the Astronomer Royal of Scotland, who died sadly 18 months ago. John and I were chatting in the hall, and this young woman came up to us and she said, "Excuse me," to John, and she showed him some of the photographs that she had taken of the night sky. John Brown was blown away by the work of this young woman and kept referring back to it throughout the weekend at Wigtown. So I'm very pleased to introduce now Helena Cochrane.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, it's a joy to see you, Helena. I mean, really, I have such a vivid memory of that day. And your mum, of course, your wonderful mum was with you. We had a lovely time. Your photographs were amazing. And I can only say, I mean, it's shocking, I suppose, in a way. No, it's not shocking. It's delightful to say that your pictures are even better now. You're doing even better work, and you've been spreading the word. I mean, you have now become an evangelist online on YouTube for astrophotography. So my warmest congratulations to you for the work that you've done. Can you tell us a little bit, before we go into how you do it, can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up doing it?
So I think actually it's a really nice link from what you were just talking about. I took early inspiration from Big Bang. And it was before Big Bang, it was when I was doing a school project, and it was when I was like 7, and it was on life on other planets. And I loved the idea that there could be aliens in space. I had never thought of that in my life before. And that was suddenly an idea in my head, that there could be other life other than humans walking around somewhere. I wanted to be the one to find that with my telescope. So I asked for a telescope, and I got one for my 10th birthday. And I started looking at the moon. And this is it was after that I started getting sort of into bigger telescopes. And I started taking photos of the moon, which is actually the ones that I showed you at Big Bang and John. And that was the stage I was at there. I was looking at lunar work, and I was using a small telescope on my windowsill, through my window, through the reflection of the window, to view the moon and the night sky, other bright objects, maybe some bright stars, but mainly the moon. And then I thought, do you know what? I really want to share this with other people, because the excitement I'm getting from it is like no other. And I found a way to do that through YouTube and the absolutely incredible astro community all over social media, primarily YouTube and Instagram, but all over. They're absolutely amazing. And I started my YouTube channel. It's going to be 2 years in April now. And from then on, I started sort of documenting my astrophotography journey. So when I entered the YouTube world, sort of, if you like, I noticed that not a lot of people were starting astrophotography from the beginning. And when I came in, I was like, this hobby is going to be difficult. This is going to be a rough ride. It's going to be a roller coaster, and there's going to be ups and downs. And I want to share that with people. So that's kind of what's led me to where I am today. It's a long, winding story.
It's absolutely amazing. I'll be talking to Abigail Beall a bit later, get her to talk a little bit for other people about the targets, and I'm sure we're going to be talking particularly about the moon as a great place to start. But Helena, can you tell us a little bit about how you do this now? Can you talk us through how this is done in your backyard?
Yeah, so the other day I actually got asked a really interesting question by someone, and they asked, is astrophotography expensive? And obviously most people would think the answer is yes, but not if you don't want it to be. So say you're in your garden, you can observe the night sky before you start learning it. So that's always what I recommend to beginners. Learn your way around things, learn where things are before you start to photograph them. Now, to answer your question for astrophotography, the main aspects of a rig are the mount, which can be traded out for like a tripod, which is the cheaper end, which is why I'm saying you don't have to go all out and have your bank screaming at you for starting a hobby. The mount, the telescope, which can be traded out for a camera lens, and the camera on the back. And basically, the Earth is moving. It's not the stars that are moving, although it looks like they are, but it's the Earth that's moving. And you need to counteract for this Earth's rotation in order to take long exposures, because obviously the sky is very dark, and it's very dark and cold at night, and you can't see a lot when you look with your eyes. And we need to leave shutters open, sensors open, to collect light for a very long period of time. And I usually leave mine open for 3 to 4 minutes. Now, when you get more advanced, you can do, 20 minutes, but I have not got that far yet with guiding. But basically, that prospect is you've got this mount, it counteracts the rotation of the Earth. The shutter's open on the other end, and that's collecting photons of light coming in through this huge telescope. And you then stack these together, you take multiple photos, because a lot of people think it's just one shot and that's it. I wish it was one shot and that's it. It's not the case. You take multiple, stack them together, and then that's how you get the photo. There's a lot more I could go into detail about, but that's basically as easy as I can put it.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I can assure everybody listening that when Helena talks about stacks and stacking, this is something that astrophotographers talk about endlessly. It seems to be the only subject that they can get their heads around. Do you want to give us a sneak little view of your setup, Helena?
Yeah, so I've actually got a video that we could maybe put up now, and it's sort of just a little overview of YouTube. In Scotland, I've got the Deep Sky rig set up to do some astrophotography tonight, and I thought I'd take you guys along for the ride. My name's Helena, and welcome back to my Actually, no, I've made one slight change to the Deep Sky rig tonight. If you haven't noticed already, I have a new telescope on the rig. This is a new but not new telescope, as in I have had it for about a year, but my guiding hasn't been sufficient enough to guide at an 840mm focal length. I've been guiding quite well at 510, so I thought I was ready to take the step up to my 840. The SPRE 120 is a triplet apochromatic refractor, meaning that it uses lenses to align the colour channels RGB, which therefore means it is more efficient in colour correction than, say, a doublet is, like my previous 80ED telescope. I'm going to be doing unfiltered imaging tonight. There's 2 reasons for that. The first one is, well, the filter cell hasn't arrived yet. That's the main reason. And the second reason is I'm really interested to see what unfiltered work is going to look like from a Bortle 2 sky, because I don't exactly suffer from light pollution, so I want to see how much contrast my conditions can bring out without a filter.
Wonderful, wonderful. We should apologize. It's not uncommon. I've been at NASA conferences where this happens. It's something to do with frame rate. Sometimes the video doesn't play as you expect. depending on the platform. It's not predictable, and apologies. But Helena, just briefly before you show us some of your wonderful images, if people want to see more of your videos, where exactly should they go to?
So primarily where I post my images is on Instagram. That's where I'm most active to ask questions as well. But equally in the YouTube comments, I do a lot of work on YouTube. So I try to upload every month. And you can ask me a question in the YouTube comments, get in touch with me there. Or equally, Facebook, Helena's Astrophotography. It's all the same. So yeah, I'm happy to help with whatever you need.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to the establishment of the Cochrane Wigtown Summer School for Young Astrophotographers. I think that has got to be the next step, and I have absolutely no doubt that it's going to happen. Can I bring Andy Lawrence in here? Because I think Andy will be most impressed by what he's seen so far. And we've, of course, yet to see the pictures.
I'm amazed. I'm just going to ask about the equipment, actually, because you've got some really impressive gear there. And it's all very technical. Now, what does someone do if they just want to dip their toes in without getting all that gear and understanding all the technicalities? How do you start?
So I always recommend, I was saying to Leo earlier, to learn your way around the night sky. But after you've done that, you can even start with a tripod, so something regular that's just a static tripod and a DSLR camera with a camera lens. I think a big issue within the hobby is people always think the bigger the better. Sometimes, yes, but other times you have to think about budgeting. And once you're in astrophotography and you throw all your money at it, you're kind of in it for life. So I always say, use what you've got and optimize the equipment you have before going all the way. So a tripod and a regular DSLR camera that you might use for daytime photography and a little camera lens is absolutely ideal for constellation photography, Milky Way photography, and moon photography. And from there, you can kind of build up. So I was saying to Leo, you can like trade out a camera lens for a telescope. And you can trade out a camera for a deep sky imaging camera. And you can change out the tripod for a mount or a star tracker, which is kind of like a smaller version of a mount. So there's lots of different combinations you can use without absolutely breaking the bank to start with. I started with a tripod and a camera, for example. And if you already have the camera and lenses, so say you already do photography, a tripod's going to be £20 and then you can start astrophotography. So you've got to be a little bit realistic when thinking about these things.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Wonderful. Very good. Very good. Okay, Helena, let's see the pictures. Can you give us I know that there is online at the Wigtown Book Festival website, there is an online exhibition, so people can spend time looking at your pictures in their own good time. But please introduce us to some of your wonderful, wonderful pictures.
Yeah, so this is actually my second most recent. The one that was shown in the video is not my best work. That was when I was starting to use a new telescope, so I was really getting to grips with things. This is with a telescope that I've been using for quite a while, so I easily got to grips with it. There's a lot of things I like to improve on though, but this is called the Horsehead and the Flame Nebula, and I'm guessing from different parts of the object you can kind of see where it gets that name from. And it is in the famous constellation Orion, and it's one of the most shot deep sky targets. It's a winter target, and unfortunately it's now setting now, so I only got 1 hour, I think, on it, which normally you'd be aiming for about 5 or 6. I would be aiming for 5 or 6, but I only got 1 on this one. But it's a really nice target, I think. And it was really difficult actually when I was shooting it, because the star next to the Flame Nebula you can see is really bright, and you have to try and layer your exposure so you don't overpower that. If you could go on to the next slide. So this is the Pac-Man Nebula. It's in the constellation Cassiopeia. And this isn't actually the true colors of the Pac-Man. You can do false color imaging and true color imaging in astrophotography. So when you use a filter, you can use a filter for light pollution, and most people do. but also it gives you the benefit of being able to separate out color channels, and you can separate out these color channels and create different color combinations. And this is called the Hubble palette, and it normally gives off this sort of orangey whitish look. And I actually preferred it to the original pink one. So yep, that was the Pac-Man Nebula. This is a close-up of the moon. So this is nothing like I was doing when I started off. This is actually a mosaic of the moon. So when you want to do high detail lunar imaging, you take what's called a mosaic, and it's exactly like the original term. It's when you stitch things together. So this was actually one panel of 3 on the moon, and you basically use this software, and it takes multiple thousand frames of the same target, and it takes the best, say 75% of the frames, and it stacks them and sharpens them to gain the best detail in the moon. This specific part of the moon is called Mare Nectaris, so it's called the Sea of Nectar. If you go on to the next slide. This is the Veil Nebula. It's a summer target. It's in the constellation Cygnus, and it's right overhead. It's a really nice target to shoot, and I'm really actually looking forward to going back to this one in June. I think I'm planning on going back to it. I'm trying to do like a 1-year anniversary of all my photos, because I originally started Deep Sky last year. So this is the Veil Nebula, and I also shot this with a light pollution filter. The other benefit of light pollution filters is you can block out moonlight. Some are more efficient in blocking out moonlight than others. And the one I have, moonlight glows in the O3 channel in a filter, and the O3 channel in the filter that I'm using here is actually quite wide, but unfortunately, I should say, I didn't get any moon glow in this, so I was quite happy with that. This has to be the favorite target I've shot. I think that might have changed because of my most recent project that I didn't show in the PowerPoint, but this is M45, the Pleiades, and it's an winter target. I think winter has the best targets, but a lot of astrophotographers will change up their minds on that. I also think summer's an awesome time, but this is M45, the Pleiades, and it's a reflection nebula, and in the constellation Taurus. And I couldn't shoot this with a filter because the emission lines that are coming from the blue nebulae are actually cut out from the filter. So I shot this on a 0% moon night to get the best out of it and to get no nasty gradients with moon glow, because you can get those sometimes in astrophotography. It's like the bane of astrophotography when you get gradients in your images. So that's M45. And then last but not least is Wigtown Bay. I've been working on some landscape photography recently. I want to get into it more, and I want to show more of it on my channel, because I realize a lot more people are going to have DSLRs and tripods rather than deep sky imaging cameras and mounts and telescopes. So this was just shot 2-minute walk down the road next to the harbour, and it's the moon. It's taken with 2 exposures. So you want to take one exposure to expose the foreground, and then a shorter one, for the moon to gain the detail, because if you take the same exposure, you're not going to get the detail on the moon. But I was super happy that I got the reflection on the water. That was really lovely. And definitely the people that were behind me in the houses were wondering what the heck was going on, but hopefully they saw the photo after and noticed what I was doing. So yeah, that's a selection of my photography that I've been doing over the past few months.
Well done. That is absolutely brilliant. Well done, Helena. Now, just to make it clear to people, I forgot to do it at the beginning. We've been streaming it below. Do please, if you have any questions, put them in the comment box on YouTube or on the Wigtown website. We'd love to get your questions, and I know Helena would love to, particularly to get questions from young people about how they can get started in this remarkable field. If she's managed to catch her breath after all of that, I'm going to bring in Abigail Beall. I mean, that's just amazing. I think we'll leave Starship Commander Helena Cochrane as she plans to go back to the Veil Nebula in June. I thought that was a brilliant line. I mean, it's really just amazing what this young woman has done. Abigail, I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing you've been trying to promote with your book.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say those photos are absolutely stunning. Like, they're incredible. And I think that's one of the major like drivers of people's interest in space, is how beautiful it is.
Okay, we are hearing you.
Oh, sorry, is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Yeah.
I know we have some latency problems, but yeah, you can keep going. There's no problem.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my book is sort of aimed at people who are maybe living in cities who may think that because they live somewhere where there's a lot of light pollution, they can't see anything. And that's just not true at all. There's loads of things people can see from cities. Obviously, you're never going to be able to capture photos like that or see really dark, like far away things like Andromeda Galaxy, but there's lots and lots of things you can see from a city.
I was really impressed by the amount of publicity you got for your book. I mean, the Washington Post recommended it highly to its readers. I mean, you've really hit the big time here, Abby.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, that was a complete surprise for me as well. But yeah, that was great. Yeah, so my book was published in the UK in 2019, and then it was published in America just at the end of last year. So just in time for people who were looking for something else to do when they were locked down at home in winter.
Yeah, actually, we might talk about that just a little bit to emphasize, as I'm sure you've been doing and I've been doing over the last 12 months, to people that really, I actually live in an apartment here in Marseille, and I can do a little bit of night sky viewing just, from my apartment block. Now, I'm limited, obviously, to the very brightest stars, but there's no reason in a time of lockdown. Hopefully, we won't go back to the worst of the lockdowns again. But in a time of lockdown, people really should think very seriously about how much they can actually do by just walking out their front door and standing in the street.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even really need to be, I mean, from inside your house, you can see things like the moon, you can see the brightest constellations. At the moment, you can see Orion, you can see Sirius, which is the brightest star in the night sky. You can see, from Orion, then you can look up to Taurus and see Aldebaran, which is the brightest star in Taurus. And then if you keep going, you can actually see the Pleiades cluster, which is something that Helena showed us before. And tonight, it's going to be right next to Mars as well in the sky. So that's a great thing to look for.
Yes, absolutely. Subaru, I think, is what the Japanese call the Pleiades. And then, of course, there's my favorite one of the way that they name constellations in other cultures. Don't forget, constellations have different names in different cultures. Yeah. My favorite one is the Japanese name for what we call Cassiopeia, which is a kind of a W-shaped constellation, a small but rather lovely constellation. They call it Two Butterflies Kissing.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I think it's just absolutely
that is
wonderful.
So nice.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. So, are you planning to do more publishing along these lines? What are your publication plans going into the future, Abby?
I don't have any plans for any more books at the moment, but I do write a sort of fortnightly newsletter, which I started at the start of the second lockdown in England, so in November last year, which tells people what they can find that week in the sky. So I think it's a great way to keep people who are interested but not necessarily going to go and do the research themselves to find out what they can see that week. So I'm doing that at the moment, and it's a great way to sort of interact with readers and people and find out what other people are interested in as well.
And going back to your current book, which is available, I think people can, if they go to the Wigtown bookshop, of course, they can get it. It's available online as an ebook, and it comes out beautifully, I have to say, as an ebook. I'm the proud owner of a copy. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, Abby, what's your favorite constellation?
Oh, that is a tough question. I think I'm going to go, I think it's probably a very obvious choice, but I'll go with Orion. And I think it's because, first of all, it's obviously so iconic and really easy to recognize in the sky, but it's also home to some really interesting stars. And it's obviously got the Orion Nebula and the Horsehead Nebula that Helena mentioned earlier. And then from Orion, you can also find your way to so many other points in the sky. But it's also home to my favorite star, which is Betelgeuse.
Yes, indeed. I think there's a movie called Beetlejuice as well. going back a little bit, I absolutely agree. And I must say, as Helena was pointing out, of course, Orion is about to disappear from our evening skies. And I always find that a rather sad time of the year, because I'm a huge fan of Orion. And I look forward every winter. I get really excited when Orion starts to appear above the horizon. I recommend it to anyone, particularly anyone, and some people will be listening to us, watching us from marine locations, by the sea. Orion is particularly beautiful out over the sea or the ocean or over a lake. It's just, everything about Orion is a joy to watch, and I strongly recommend people read your book and read about how to get the most out of these. Okay, so your favorite star.
My favorite star.
Difficult for you here.
No, I think I'd say I have two favorite stars, which would be Procyon and Sirius, the dog stars. And I also just love dogs. I have two dogs myself, and I think I really like storytelling, and I think it's a great way to learn your way around the night sky as well. And that's a lot of the reason the constellations were named. So Orion is the hunter, and the dog stars are sort of following behind him. So it's like the hunter is being chased by his two loyal dogs. And then on the other side is the bull that he's trying to hunt, which is Taurus. And if you sort of tell yourself these stories, it makes it so much easier to remember all the different names of the constellations, because, let's face it, there's so many of them. They're really hard to remember.
Indeed. The book that I would love to see is I would love somebody to try and reconstruct, would hope accurately, what the Celtic mythology about the night sky was. What did they call Orion? They must have had a name for it.
Yeah.
It's such an unmistakable object in the sky. I think it would be very, very interesting and revealing of the culture if we could find out what they call them. So, Abby, thank you very much. Stay with us, obviously, because we are going to continue this conversation through to the top of the hour. We've lots of questions coming in, but I'd like to go to Andy Lawrence before we take questions from our viewers, because Andy has a what we call in Irish a such scale to tell, a sad story to tell, of a warning to the future, as it were, because there has been a dark realization only in the very, very recent past. It's only Andy actually puts a date on it. What date was it? January or February 2020?
You mean when the first Starlink satellites were being
exactly seen? Yes,
late 2019 actually.
Right. Yes, I know that in your book you give the date, and I just forgot to jot it down.
Yeah. I didn't really sort of spot what was happening until a little bit later, but the people were starting to complain in late 2019.
So, can you explain to people what we're talking about? Because this has come, as you say very strikingly in your book, from left field. It's alarming a great many astronomers, professionals like Brian May, for instance, a professional astronomer and photographer, indeed, the famous Queen guitarist, he is greatly alarmed by it, as we learned from his introduction to your book, and a lot of others. Can you explain to a general audience what exactly is worrying you?
Yeah, I'll do so. So I must say I'm going to feel a bit of a wet blanket now after Helena's beautiful pictures, and I've got to say I love Abigail's approach to things. It's very simple and practical. But I've got to say what I got to say. Perhaps we could step up my slides, and I'll just skip through them quickly. So this is just the cover of the book, so you know the book exists. It's an ebook or an Amazon paperback, and so you can go and find it on multiple platforms. It's non-technical, so anybody can read it, and it's a very personal approach. If we go to the next slide, there's two problems. This is the one we've known about for a long time, and why the Dumfries and Galloway Dark Sky Park exists. Light pollution. This is a view from the famous Californian observatory, Mount Wilson. And the glare of the Los Angeles lights mean that you can't see a thing. This actually shows forest fires as well, so it's doubly scary. But then the next picture shows the new problem. So this is a picture taken by another astrophotographer, Raphael Schmoll, who's Hungarian. And this is the star Albireo, or Beta Cygni. And his picture had all these streaks going across it. If we look at the next slide, we see the same thing, some more streaks going across now. A professional image. This is the Dark Energy Survey camera by a sort of multinational team. The next picture, it shows yet another example. This is from the Hubble Space Telescope. So you're not even fixed if you're in space. This is a fat streak going across. So if we look at the next slide, I like this as well. This is a colleague of mine who was taking a selfie with his mobile phone and saw a streak across the sky. That's the large and small Magellanic clouds you can see there, by the way. This is from the southern hemisphere. Okay, so what's this all about? If we go into the next slide, you see that what it's all about is these things. This is an artist's impression. It's satellites. And now, of course, there's been occasional streaks across the sky from satellites for many years. We're used to this happening, but it's suddenly sort of exploded out of all recognition, this problem. And initially, at least, it's all down to our old friend Elon Musk and SpaceX and the Starlink project. See, until the number of satellites has been slowly increasing over the years, and in 2019 there were maybe 2,000 in total. By 1 year later, there were 3,000. The extra 1,000 were from the Starlink project from Elon Musk. And the prediction, they're planning 42,000 satellites. And the prediction from other companies trying to get on the act is that by 2029, there'll be 100,000 satellites. This makes a huge difference. It means that everybody looking through some binoculars or staring at the night sky, or professionals taking images, there are going to be streaks across your images the whole time. And it doesn't matter where you are. And unlike the light pollution, which at least you can try and get away from somewhere dark, you cannot get away from this. They're over your sky an hour and a half after they're launched somewhere else. I think my next slide is the last one, and then I'll go back to conversation. Oh, second to last one. This is just showing you that lots of other companies are getting in on the act. It's not just Elon Musk and Starlink. Everybody's jumping on this bandwagon. Now, if we go to the next slide, you might have heard that what it's about is the internet and connecting up the world. Second problem, as well as the streaks across the sky, is going to badly increase the problem of space debris and things crashing into each other. It's going to make it hard to do space commercial activity or space science or astronomy from space, because it's going to become increasingly a dangerous place to be. And NASA and ESA, the European Space Agency, are both very concerned about this. Right, I think finally the next slide is my last slide. Yeah, okay. So you'll have heard that it's about trying to connect up the world with, get internet to remote places. And that's misleading, because we can do that anyway without having thousands and thousands of satellites in very low orbit. And people have been working on this problem for ages. The reason that Elon Musk and others are trying to put up thousands of satellites at low orbit, it's about high speed, low latency, as we say, short time delays. And this is driven, I think, largely by bankers, by the finance industry. It's in order to have very fast connections between London and New York, or Tokyo and San Francisco, to do high frequency trading faster than the other guys. So this is where a lot of the investment is coming from. That, and just, you know, international competition. So it's very alarming. And as you say, it's come out of left field, and it's just got a lot of us rather frightened. Okay, I think that's the end of my rant. So.
Well, I mean, people are definitely worried, although you do say in your book, I thought it was an interesting observation, that you were an early adopter, and you're very much in favor of the internet, obviously, and you never imagined that these two things would come into conflict. Yes. You're satisfied that there are ways of, I mean, I know, for instance, there's an application from Elon Musk, of all people, for a license to broadcast into what we call the Black Valley in County Kerry. It's actually near the Kerry Dark Sky Park, as it happens. And it's not called the Black Valley for nothing. It was the last place in Ireland to get electricity back in the 1960s of all times. And Musk is arguing that he can give them internet, and he thinks that if he can get internet into the Black Valley, it will be a slam dunk to persuade other communities to get involved. Are you in any way concerned that a push by astronomers might deprive isolated communities, or do you really think that there are better ways of doing this?
There are better ways of doing it. This is not necessary simply to have internet connection. It absolutely is not. For instance, there's been other companies around trying to do this for some time. A company called O3B, which stands for the other 3 billion. People have much higher satellites and very many fewer of them. So, and they've only got so far. And as usual, in his inimitable manner, you know, Elon Musk has been going very gung-ho at it, and trying to, as the Americans say, sort of move fast and break things. But I think that's what it's about. It's about kind of capturing market share, and about having this very short time delay connection. This is necessary mostly for the internet. So I think if there's a concerted sort of fight back by the general public, as well as by astronomers, then hopefully we can do something sensible. But international space regulation is a little bit loose. So I won't get too much into that, because it gets very kind of technical, that area. But I think we've got to end up with better regulation, basically, is the answer to all this.
Andy, we've had a very interesting question just come in online, and I think I'll pitch it to you straight away. Very, very interesting question. Wondering how these satellites might affect migratory birds. There's obviously research and concern about the effects of dark sky. We know, historically, that it's a problem, with birds in cities not knowing when it's day or night and so on. So there are real impacts of light pollution that we know of. But do we know anything? Is there any work being done on how these satellites might affect the way migratory birds navigate?
Well, let's qualify "we" here, because I don't know the answer to that question, I'm afraid. But I know there are some people taking that question seriously. As you said, it's for light pollution in general, it's a well-known problem. Light pollution is a problem for the animal kingdom as well as for us as humans. For the satellite trails, I know there are some people starting to think about that and study it. But personally, I don't know where that's got to and what the answer is, I'm afraid.
And another question we got in while we're still on the subject of light pollution is asking what factors are making light pollution more of a problem. And how can we avoid things getting worse?
Well, light pollution in general, I mean, that's a very general societal thing, as we all become more affluent and we forget about the night sky and all its beauties and importance and so on. So to most people, it's just that, they don't care enough, and they prefer having, their sort of well-lit streets, and don't think about how lights can have hats on, and, so there are just very broad societal development problems. Specifically for the satellite pollution, it's been driven by what is otherwise a good thing, which is the democratization of the ability to launch satellites. So it's not all dominated by the Americans and ESA and the Japanese. There are private companies who can launch spacecraft, and that's a good thing, right? But it has led to this problem. And I think it's the classic, environmental problem. I think it's the tragedy of the commons. Is that as an aggressive company, you think, there's a free resource out there, I'm going to capture it and do stuff with it. So you do that, but it makes a problem that the rest of us have to pay for to clear up or improve. So that's it to me. I think it's a classic tragedy of the commons problem.
Well, Andy, I have a feeling you're going to be in a whole world of grief if they suddenly start launching these ghastly Constellation satellites from Scotland. But
luckily, so last night there was a meeting of the Astronomical Society of Edinburgh, which I'm the honorary president of, and I attended that. And there was somebody from Skyrora, who is it's a Scottish launch company. So they're not a problem. They make a big deal about sustainability. They're not launching thousands of big things that will give this sort of problem. So I think they're okay. But potentially they can make the debris problem worse. And they've really got to think about that carefully. And they have wondered whether they can get into the salvage business, for instance, collecting other people's rubbish and bringing it back. And I think there's some legal problems with that, which again, I won't go into. So I hope there is an opportunity for Scotland to encourage commercial activity, but do it in a sustainable way. But time will tell.
Excellent. Very, very good. Let's bring Abby and Helena back in to this discussion, because we're getting lots and lots of questions. And the first question I wanted is actually one for each of you. I thought it was quite a good question. What is your personal favorite app for identifying what's in the night sky? I'll let Helena start that one.
So personally, I use Skyview. And it's an app. It's available on Android and Apple, I believe, but there's also other alternatives, which Abby will probably mention. But Skyview is the one I use, and it's really simple. You basically punch in your location. It actually uses your automatic GPS on your phone, and you bring it up to the sky. And when you move, the stars move with you. So you are where the stars are, and you know where everything is. So Skyview is one I'd really recommend.
And Abby, your thoughts?
Yeah, Skyview, I use that as well, and it's great. I would also add Stellarium, which is really great also for planning when you want to look at stuff, because it's also got a really great desktop free software that you can download on your computer, or you can just use it on your browser, and you can put in any place in the world at any time as well, and it'll show you what the sky looked like then or in the future. So it's really great for planning, like if you're going somewhere or if you want to see when a constellation's rising or anything. It's really good for that.
And Andy, do the professionals use anything different, or are you using one of these general apps?
Yeah, we do have some quite specialized tools, but for more general use, I would also vote for Stellarium. It's open source as well, which is very nice. But I would also recommend a website called In the Sky, which is made by Dominic Ford, who is also a professional astronomer. And it's a beautiful educational tool, as well as being a good sort of planetary software.
Excellent. Oh, I'll definitely check that one out. The technical question for you, Helena. How do you decide when to use a DSLR camera versus a Says here, ZWO dedicated imager. I hope you know what I'm asking.
Yeah, so ZWO is basically just a brand of deep sky imaging camera, for those who didn't know. But the main difference between a DSLR camera and a ZWO, or dedicated astronomy imaging camera, is with a dedicated astrocam, you can cool down the sensor and control the temperature of the sensor. So this is really important when shooting in long exposures, especially in the summer, because if you're shooting in the summer with, say, a Canon camera, you can't control the heat. And that's going to get up to maybe 18 degrees, and it's going to create this thing that we refer to as noise. And the best way to think of it is red and green speckles in your photos. And because deep sky objects are very faint, the noise can completely obliterate faint objects. So how you would choose between the two, I would say if you already have a DSLR, definitely use that. There's some photos that I have seen that absolutely blow my mind that I think have been taken with a deep sky imaging camera. I personally don't think I stayed with a DSLR for long enough, and I am more than willing to go back to one. I have one if I'm ready to do that. But if you want to jump straight to a DSO imaging camera, I would recommend that you are certain that you're going to stick with the astrophotography hobby, because deep sky imaging cameras are on the other end of expensive.
I can well imagine. I have another question that I'm afraid you're going to have to decode for me. Somebody in the audience says that they enjoyed your recent collaboration with Nico. What was that about, and what other ones have you got? Any more planned?
Yeah, so Nico and I did a collaboration last summer. Nico is a fellow astrophotography YouTuber. He runs Nebula Photos over on YouTube. He's an absolutely insane astrophotographer. And we collaborated on a video to make an HA RGB image of a photo. And that sounds really wacky, but basically RGB is what a color camera would produce. And Nico shoots in a black and white camera. So to put it simply, he uses filters to make up a color photo. And you can go into a lot of technical detail about this, but basically black and white cameras are more sensitive. So you're gaining a more quantum efficiency when you're capturing your light. So you're using better use of your time, if you see what I mean, when you're using a black and white camera. So Nico captured the emission line, also known as hydrogen alpha, in black and white. And I captured RGB, which is just a regular DSLR camera. And we merged them together to create a final image of Cygnus Wall. It was absolutely fantastic. Nico and I have already spoken last year about doing another one. Unfortunately, kind of COVID and my exams took over a bit this winter, so we didn't really have time to work on something, but we are planning on doing something again, definitely. I'd love to work on something with him again.
Excellent, very good. Abby, just going back to the whole question of smartphones and astrophotography, I've noticed that Mark Cochrane, who Andy would know well, of the European Space Agency, Mark has been posting on Twitter photographs that he's a crazy biker. You know, he goes out on his bicycle, not motorbike. He goes out on his bicycle every day and cycles 60 kilometers in Holland. But he's taking amazing pictures with his smartphone of the night sky. I mean, have you come across this? And is this something that people could consider? That if they're, and I'll pitch it to Helena as well, if she wants to, and if Andy wants to pitch in. Is there something that we can do with these amazing new smartphones?
Yeah, I think the technology is just improving so much even over the past few years. I don't have a Google Pixel, but I know that the latest Google Pixel with it has like an astronomy mode on the camera. And I've seen people, a friend of mine who's also a space journalist, he has posted a few pictures taken from London and of Orion and the Pleiades, and they're so clear just from his phone. And yeah, I think the technology is just coming on leaps by, and obviously the moon is also another one. Lots of people can take great photos of the moon with just their phones as well.
I'd just add to that one of the slides that I showed, the one with somebody standing on a catwalk and a street, that was taken with his Android phone in astrophotography mode. So I've not tried it myself, but obviously, you know, that was obviously quite impressive.
Yeah.
I have a vision of me trying to take a picture of that dark sky.
Yeah.
We're actually running out of time, folks, because I could certainly spend another hour chatting to you. It's been absolutely wonderful. We have one more question in, and I'd just like to picture to Andy, if I may, before we do a last round robin. Andy, we've had a question from somebody who wonders if this idea that Elon Musk has been exploring of painting his satellites black. I mean, I see there's an old Rolling Stone song that comes to mind. But if he paints it black, does that help?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to emphasize that even though at the moment SpaceX and Elon Musk are kind of the villains, they have been trying to engage with the astronomy community. I don't think anybody's spoken to Elon Musk himself, but you know, some of us have spoken to SpaceX engineers, and they did do this experiment of painting a satellite black, and another experiment in which they controlled the attitude of the roll of the satellite very carefully, and it does make a difference. Not enough to kind of cure it for professional astronomy, maybe enough to improve it a lot for naked eye astronomy, but not for astrophotographers and not for professionals. But it was, you know, it was showing some willing. So my real problem, you see, is that SpaceX is just the thin end of the wedge. You know, after a bit, you know, once every nation, every company are sort of jumping on this, you know, we won't be able to have nice conversations with all of them. I mean, imagine some random Brazilian or Chinese company. What are you going to do? You know, they'll just tell us to go away when we try and speak to them. That's why there's got to be regulation. So yeah, well done for Elon Musk on that front, but it's not enough.
Indeed, indeed. So what I'd like to finish with, if I may, one of the segments in our last session that I chaired here at Wigtown a couple of days ago, we talked a bit about women in space science and astronomy, and so I thought I'd like to end our evening with that discussion. And sadly, I'm actually going to begin with Andy, because I wanted to bring in the issue of Vera Rubin and the wonderful Vera Rubin Observatory, because just to put a complete dampener on everything now, it does seem that these constellation satellites may be actually a threat to the entire reason for existence of the Vera Rubin Observatory. Is that your take on it, Andy?
Yeah, that's maybe, to be fair, slightly over dramatic, because it won't make it completely pointless, but it'll make everything take longer, ruin lots of images. And that telescope was named in honor of Vera Rubin, which is a marvelous thing to have done. So it seems such a shame. Not surprising, because it's a big American project. In the UK, certainly in Edinburgh and Belfast, for instance, we're part of that project, but it's led in the US, and they've been amongst the most active in getting in touch with the SpaceX people for obvious reasons. I just wanted to pop on another point in there, though, but much worse is the problem for the big new facility in radio astronomy, the Square Kilometre Array. These things also blare out radio signals, and they're a big problem for the Square Kilometre Array.
Yeah, indeed. I've been involved in some of the planning on that, and yeah, it's a complete nightmare. Helena, you've actually talked about women in space science on your YouTube channel. I mean, we, as I said, we got a lot of response from our discussion last, I think it was Thursday or Friday, about this issue. And the fact that, I mean, people are beginning, as we see the Vera Rubin Observatory is a very good example. People are beginning to wake up to the scale of the involvement of women in astronomy. But as a young woman yourself, I mean, what's your take on this? Were you surprised when you began to realize just how many women made such key contributions that were somehow forgotten?
Yes, so when I initially started astrophotography, like after my interest in space has started, this was like a few years on, I started astrophotography, and the main people that I were following were males in the hobby. And I didn't see a lot of females pursuing astro. I didn't see a lot starting up YouTube channels. I didn't find a lot on Instagram, but to be fair, I started Instagram quite late. And then I sort of wanted to do something about that. I felt like it was kind of because they didn't have like someone to look up to, like a role model to say, oh, I can do that. Because she's a girl, I can do that. Like, I remember one of my primary school friends said to me that they wanted to be a doctor. And I was like, go for it, like 5-year-old me. And then she said to me, oh, I can't because I'm a girl. And that's kind of sparked when I was like 5. Probably about 8, but when I was really young, and that sort of sparked it for me that it was an issue. But since coming into astrophotography, I have been a part of the most amazing women in astrophotography group called Stella, and it stands for Striving to Engage Ladies in Astrophotography. And we meet every week and we talk about all things astro, not just astro. It's like a support group. We can talk about what we had for dinner last night. And it's not necessarily just weekly calls. Like, we'll call at any point in the week. We'll give each other processing tutorials. We host things on Instagram. And I was thinking the other day, like, how much the expanse of women in the hobby has changed since I started. Because from that moment in primary school, when that person said to me, I didn't see a lot of women in science, and to now, there's this group of tens of women, and it's forever growing every day. I'm always getting a tag and a thing in Discord saying, everyone, here's a new member. I'm like, woohoo! Like, we're always getting new members in all the time now. And I think that would have been unheard of a few years ago. So it is forever changing. And I'm really glad to be a part of that.
That's absolutely wonderful. A very, very thoughtful contribution. I'm thinking of one of the pioneers of the current wave of women, of course, is my very close and dear friend, Emily Lakdawala of the Planetary Society in Los Angeles. Emily's family name is Stewart. So there's a Scottish connection there. Abby, what's your take on this and the sudden discovery, shock horror that women have actually been contributing? We know for a fact that women invented agriculture, but nobody ever talks about that because they were the ones who knew that you had to prepare for the bad day while the men went out and enjoyed themselves hunting and shooting. But what's your take on how it's taken so long to recognize these extraordinary women?
I think, I don't know why it's taken so long, but I think the main thing now is that we just keep recognizing and celebrating those women. And it's a problem across all the sciences, but it's a problem in physics and astronomy especially, and it's across every aspect of it, even from female astronauts to people behind the scenes. And I actually wrote an article about this a couple of years ago about how few female astronauts there have been. And I spoke to some female astronauts, people who'd worked for NASA and ESA, and they said the main reason they were inspired to do that is because of a significant role model who they saw when they were younger. And I think, like Helena said, the importance of having female role models for young women who are interested in it just can't be overstated. It's so important. So I think as long as people keep talking about it and celebrating those women, it's only going to get better.
Wonderful, and congratulations to you, Abby, and to Helena for being such eloquent promoters of science and being great role models. I look forward, Helena, to the first Cochrane Summer School on astrophotography in Wigtown. That's going to be one hell of a session when it opens.
Sign me up.
Yeah, do keep me posted.
I'm coming if the pubs are open again. Okay.
The pubs will be open.
Indeed. My thanks to Andy, to Abby, and to Helena. Thank you, all of you, for a really wonderful, wonderful session. And from us, good night.